down to see this exhibition. Just a couple of things before we start. If you're interested in any of the pictures, you can talk to Lydia or I or Nick about them. If you'd like to talk a bit more about them. If you're not on our newsletter, please sign up to our newsletter. You'll find out about our other events which are happening. Coming up next is a wine tasting. Some flyers knocking around. That's 4th of July. As a special for this particular evening, so if you want to buy them today, we're doing them at about 15% off the ticket price. So instead of £23.50, they're £20 if you want to buy one today, and that's 4th of July. And we're also running, we've got a print club out the back. We're running etching tasters every Wednesday evening. So these pictures, this exhibition is all done by Nick Syfret. Amazing job, looks really good, I think. Nick's a retired QC or KC, I'm not sure what it counts as anymore.
I'm long forgotten.
As a result, I know that he can talk for Britain. I asked him to be George, but I'm not going to time you. I'm sure there's lots of very interesting things to talk about. I look forward to hearing more about it. Over to you next. Thank you.
I used to get this nervous when I had an appointment before the Court of Appeals, and for about 10 days, 15 days before the Court of Appeal, I couldn't sleep. I couldn't do anything except think about it. Well, ladies and gentlemen, the same applies today. But I will start by saying thank you. Thank you to Capuchin Picture Framers, particularly to Alex and Lydia, who are the people who have worked so hard to put this together, and I'm delighted with what they have done. Thank you very much for all of you for coming. I appreciate that it's not been easy, particularly for those who've had to sweat their way through London and beyond. And one very special thank you to Veronica, because our very old friend Veronica, who's been a friend of Cat and mine for over 40 years, was the one who came and found me in the shed, a shed that you can see there, which Jim Donoghue photographed me with one of my pictures. Came and saw the pictures in my shed and said, you really ought to do something about it and have a go at having an exhibition. And without her drive and input, I don't think I would have got as far as I have today. So thank you very much. Meet the artist. Well, that's a slightly intimidating phrase as far as I'm concerned. The artist. Well, I spent almost my entire life as a lawyer, and suddenly at the end to find that I'm being called an artist is a bit of almost a shock to the system. But when I look back, it perhaps isn't quite as surprising as it sounds, because my family background was very much one where drawing and painting were the order of the day. My mother was an outstanding illustrator, even though her illustrations are somewhat out of time in that they were appropriate for the audiences of the 1930s rather than the audiences of today. But any of you who have seen her illustrative work will know what a phenomenal talent she had. I also had talented grandmothers, Granny Lucy, and then of course my other grandmother, who was one of the original students of the Dresden School of Art. And my great-grandparents likewise produced some fabulous pictures. And my siblings, Toby, my brother Toby, who has himself exhibited in Great Abington and I think Newcastle. And my sister was also a fine painter who died tragically in a car accident in 1977. when she was at the time the art mistress of Bude School in Cornwall. So with that background, it was hardly surprising that I've taken to drawing and painting all my life. The only time I've ever actually earned a living from it was after I took my law degree and went to work for a magazine in South Africa called Drum. And I worked there for 2 years. My job was to sell advertising. And I did that, and I sold the advertising, and then the fun bit was I got to make up the adverts. And so I did all the design work, all the advertisements, and worked with things like, I wonder how many are old enough here to know what Letraset is. Well, things like Letraset, hot wax, you remember hot wax, rule tape, all those things were skills that I learnt for the 2 years after my degree in South Africa. I had the great good fortune that the editor of the magazine Drum at the time was a chap called Tony Sutton, and Tony Sutton himself was a student of the great Harold Evans, who, those of you who know the history of design, will know that Harold Evans revolutionised the design of Sunday Times in the 60s and 70s, and in fact is responsible really for the way we have our newspapers designed today. So he was immensely helpful to work out how to put things on paper, how to do the balance between lines and illustration and things of that nature. He taught me, above all, the sacred art of cropping. You can make gold out of dross once you know how to crop something properly. So from after the 2 years in South Africa, I came back, and with my family responsibilities, I went into the law, which I was to do for the next 42 years. But in the course of those 42 years, I managed always to draw and paint. You'll see set out on those, on the bench behind you, the sort of activity that I went in for, doing the village fete designs and things of that nature. You'll see rule tape and faded masking paint and things of that kind, as well as pictures of juries and pictures of, there's one picture of 5 defendants who I thought must have been particularly stupid. So there you are, but those were the sort of surreptitious things I would do in court, hiding my notebook beneath the person's little sketch away. I did a very good picture, I'm going to say so myself, of the recorder of London, a man called Sir Peter Beaumont, who did the course of a murder trial, and very surreptitiously I completed the picture, and I said to the clerk, would you like to... No, this isn't it. That is clerk. I said, would you like to show this to his lordship? And she went to the list. She said, his lordship knows that you have been drawing his work. I didn't take it any further. Well, so that was my background throughout my life until retiring 3 years ago, when I've been able to give a lot more time to my painting generally. So to the pictures themselves. The driving force behind my pictures is the idea of ornamentation. So I don't want to paint pictures that are simply standard views of bluebells in woodland, or something that as beautiful as they are. I'm not saying anything against bluebells in woodland, but taking from what I saw, particularly on my travels with the cat, what we saw, and thinking how it would become a picture, a design. So with the pictures that you see around you, the type of objects in particular that came through to me were things like Suzanni's. Now Suzanni is an ornamental rug, tapestry, normally done by a lady about to get married as a bridal gift to the people that she was going to, the family she was going to marry into. The Suzanis are often quite large. They can be as much as 8 foot, 9 foot across, 6, 7 foot high, and they are beautiful. They are absolutely fantastic. And they're under-recognized for what they are. The designs are under-recognized. So that picture, the one behind Robert, that was the very first picture I did from this moment of taking on the idea of using what I could see around me to make pictures out of. And that originally, that Suzani there, started off as being about 6 or 7 foot across and maybe 5 foot deep. It wasn't designed quite like that. I've adjusted it. I moved the bottom 4 semicircles also occurred at the top. I thought it made it look clumsy and took away the emphasis from the central disc, which is meant to be the idea of the sun. So it's not a copy of what I saw, but it is very much based upon that design. So the Suzanis around here, which are they? There's that one. Now this one here is a slight difference. This is a wall, an embroidery that you have across doors quite often in Central Asia. So they will have a well embroidered piece of cloth with this central triangle. And they're a door's width, so they're about like that. And then the central triangle hangs down. And by taking that design and putting it around all 4 sides, I was left with the bit in the corner bit, orange and grey with a bit of blue in that particular picture. And those are my design, trying to keep the spirit of the other original side. So that was the sort of Suzanis, and then of course there were the mosques. The walls of mosques are fascinating throughout Central Asia. They will decorate the wall of a mosque with these small tiles, and that picture in the corner was one where I photographed the side of a mosque. I think it was in Bukhara. I don't absolutely remember, but it then translated it into picture, and that is what you see hanging there. Besides mosques and walls of mosques, you have carpets. Now, carpets, of course, are very special to Central Asia in particular, and that one with the snakes, they are weaving in and out of a carpet that I saw in, where was it? Somewhere in Georgia, Tbilisi. But the snakes are, needless to say, my invention, adding snakes, because I wanted to get the idea that although you've got a design that is essentially 2-dimensional, that you can make an amusing 3-dimensional point out of it by having the snakes going in and out of the design. You've also got 2 frogs, and that's partly because I like frogs. It is also, the idea is to put a bit of humour into pictures. I think pictures can be far too solemn a lot of the time. Those frogs are obviously worried by the snakes, and one of them's got out of the way in the top left corner, but the chap down the bottom right's had a narrow escape, if you ask me. But so rugs are important. Are there any other rug paintings? Yes, there's a Mongolian rug behind there, which is red and blue. There are many pictures that I have yet to do that are based upon rugs, based particularly on Armenian dragon carpets. Now there is there, I think, if you could hand that. when my son Robert, who is over there, in the mauve shirt, married Victoria, who is from Armenia, I made a series of placemats out of my inspiration from Armenian dragon carvings. So the idea is that you've got suggested dragons, little faces and beards, or a dragon up here, or a couple of dragons facing off in the middle, and there's a little load of dragons around here. And the colours are very much of the range that you get in Armenia. There's a particular combination of colours I find very attractive, which actually is more obviously in the Mongolian carpet one, where you have a brown, a white, a deep red and a deep blue. And a lot of the dragon carpets of Armenia rely on that particular colour range. This, just so you understand the political significance, it's about the only time I've ever done a political picture in my life. The design down here, the orange, the blue and the red, are the colours of the national flag of Armenia. And the white checker that goes in and out is Nagorno-Karabakh, which is the Armenian enclave that is in Azerbaijan, which the Azeris totally genocidally have taken away from the Armenian people. And it's a great sadness, I know, to Victoria and to all of us who love Armenia. The crosses are again part of the story, because the central cross is based upon the Armenian stone carvings called Kachkars. I think I'm getting that pronunciation correctly. But they are wonderful things, and they decorate the sides of many Armenian churches. And the stone carving of these Kachkars is going to provide me with inspiration for many pictures to come. Look at that. So the crosses are because, as those of you who know your history, Armenia is the oldest Christian kingdom of all, and therefore the Christian element of the crosses is important to that picture. So the combination of the Artsakh Nagorno-Karabakh flag going around, and the Christian crosses and the dragon carpet make that my only political picture. Besides carpets, I then move on to pottery. Now, pottery is my great delight. Before COVID, by about 1 week, I managed to escape with Cat to Lisbon, and there, by pure chance, I found myself in the Gulbenkian Museum, and the Gulbenkian Museum had a collection of Iznik pottery plates. Now, Iznik pottery plates are about this sort of size in real life, they're about that width and about that high, and they are actually a fairly basic form of pottery. I say basic because you see Iznik plates and you go, oh, that's amazing. In fact, Iznik plates were made obviously in nearby Istanbul, but not in Istanbul itself. And because they were the plates of the poor, there are not many of them surviving, because in Istanbul, over the centuries, you had a number of fires, and the sort of households that used Iznik pottery were poor households, and therefore complete examples of Iznik pottery are not that common. And in places like the Topkapi Palace, for example, because it was made of stone and didn't burn, along with everything else, a lot of pottery survives. This is in fact Chinese, because the rich people in Istanbul wanted the best quality pottery, and they'd have the Chinese porcelain. But these Iznik plates, I think, are absolutely wonderful. But I wanted to both celebrate them and be amused by them. So you have two in that picture there. The one on the left, before I messed around with it, was straightforward dogs hunting hares with a few mythical creatures in the middle. The one on the right was didn't have any creatures in it at all, but had a sort of undergrowth of blue. And it occurred to me that if the dogs were going to hunt the hares needed somewhere to hide. So it was obvious that they had to jump into the plate next door, which is what they've done. And you can see that one of the hares, towards at the bottom of the picture on the right, is looking very complacent because he's found a suitable place, and I think he thinks he's safe. And anyway, so you've got, that was one pottery plate. This is another. The one in the middle was based on another Iznik pottery plate. The difference being that I've added a pomegranate tree, which wasn't there before, because I wanted to get the sense of paradise in the middle of the plate. So you've got the rather stupid peacocks who are just enjoying themselves, basically, long-time symbols of abundance. And then you've got the pomegranates, again a symbol of plenty. And then within the paradise, guarded by the bounds of the plate, outside things are slightly different. And you've got two lion figures. The lions, in fact, are cribs from Armenian illustration. And I like the lions, I just added those. The frog is quite carefully coloured. He's not randomly that colour. I looked up poisonous South American tree frogs, and that is one of them. And then you've got some birds and dragons and things. But dragons are normally associated with evil, funnily enough, but not these dragons, they're quite friendly. And then there's a dog in the bottom left-hand corner, who I think has had enough, quite honestly, and he's going to slope off thinking we're all idiots. Another Iznik plate, the one that I love, is that one there. You've got to imagine it without the fish, without the two octopuses, and what I thought when I looked at that picture and saw it for the first time, how it felt like it was underwater. There was something about that, and therefore it occurred to me to put it in the context of an underwater scene with creatures. The bottom fish in the bottom left-hand corner is obviously slightly disapproving of the show-off fish in the top right corner. The octopuses are just looking on, and then you've got some really dark fish who are simply going through without any awareness of anything at all. But it's all part and parcel of trying to get the idea of a bit of humour into the picture, but also to celebrate the pottery, because it is beautiful. And the basic design of the pottery with those, I think they're sort of artificial hyacinth designs of pomegranates and whatever it is, just to make something different out of it all. So I think that is pretty much the review of the pictures that you can see here, except for this one. This was based upon the pottery tiles in the Topkapi Palace in Istanbul. It's a bit of an experiment for me, because what I did was I took a bit of 5 plywood, cut out these there, and painted them on 3 ply, so that they are sunk 2 millimeters lower than the surrounding this part. And my idea for that was to try and get, if the light was shining on it in a particular way, to get the framing almost of the picture. I hope it works. The colours, of course, are mine rather than the Istanbul colours, which traditionally those are the sort of colour range you would get in that type of pottery, tiles rather. So that comes to the final bit, and most of which I've done already. It all starts with photographs or sketches. Then there's the design. So if we take the stork picture in the corner, I saw this and I thought, it might be rather fun to make into a design. So I work away at the designs until I come up with something that I think I halfway like. So when I've got the design almost finished, these are some of the early iterations, the stalks, some of the children in the stalk picture, and then you end up with something you think, well, I can make something of this. So it then comes a question of translating the sketches, my has and lots of those things, to get them from the design onto the wood, because my canvases are supplied by Messrs. Wicks, the hardware store, with 5-ply being my favourite. And I was taught the trick, and I recommend it to any of you who want to use Messrs. Wicks. Paint both sides with the undercoat, because that prevents it warping. So I've been told only after I did a number of pictures only painting one side that warped. Then the various ways of translating in some of them I use a grid system. So I've done a picture here which is on the drawing board, as it were, based again on an Iznik pottery frame with one of the standard Iznik themes, which is a sailing ship. We've got a bit of the Hagia Sophia in the background, and a few extra sea monsters, again, that you can find in Islamic art of that type. So that's then divided in 16, and I have put it onto a board, and I've made a grid of that sort. This was, I'm very struck in Provence by looking down from a hill on the rooftops of houses in Provence with all the different clay colours, and I photographed it so you can see the sort of thing there. Well, to put that onto a canvas, I did a grid 1 to 7, 1 to 9, made it onto the bit of plywood, and then bit by bit simply took each square one at a time and followed the drawing of it. And then once I'd done that, I then applied the paint. This one, a slightly different technique. I used stencils. So that then fixed on there, and then holding it in place, I then basically by sight copied this design onto there by just looking at thinking, it goes by the curve bit, it's about 2.5 inches, 2.5 inches that way, and did that all. Then you've got, again, by a method of copying, so the stencil for these bases, basically that, and I simply held it up there and then copied it in pencil below, and did it there, and there 6 times in all. We've got another stencil for, is it this one? No, it must be a different picture. But it is incredibly time consuming. Once you put the pencil design onto the wood, I use pencil incidentally, and I strongly advise you to use pencil if I'm sure people much more experienced than me don't use ink. Ink is almost impossible to put paint over it thick enough to stop the ink, black ink keeps coming through, which is absolutely maddening. Then the paint is applied. Acrylic, I use acrylic because I don't have any space, as you can see. That's the shed in which I've been painting. I rarely get the colours I like first time, so most of the painting, certainly that one, has probably had the paint applied to it 4 to 5 times. And you just do it until you think you got it in a way that you feel is right. Lots of experiments, therefore, on the way before you end up with a picture that satisfies you. So that's it, really. It's crude, but I hope to some degree effective. And where does the future lie for this ex-lawyer and now artist? Well, to some degree, it is. I'm mining, as well as the present, I'm also mining the past. I mean, I've been drawing all my life. I've got hundreds and hundreds of pictures that I look through. And there are a lot of pictures that I thought, oh God, that doesn't work. You put it to one side, it's a rubbish, but you don't throw it out. And maybe you come back to it later. You think, well, I can do something about it. And it's surprising how these pictures do. You look at something like this. This was a roof of a barn in the south of France. It had a piano in the bottom. I've never yet made it into a picture, but I just feel there is one there. So these pictures have stayed with me, and they are what I hope will become the trade for Messrs. Caversham picture framers in the future. Thank you very much.